Is Legend in the Mist the D&D killer? And more importantly, should you purchase it? That's what we're going to look at here today on Templar's Tabletop. Welcome to the channel where we are all about making your role-playing games AAA. Affordable, approachable, and awesome. What are we looking at today? That is the game Legend in the Mist. This was recently released by Son of Oak Game Studios in the PDF format, and they have asked content creators far and wide to share their thoughts on the game. So up first, is this a D&D killer? No, you YouTube simpleton. That's just clickbait terms that we use to draw you in, to get that engagement. Sweet engagement. Did it work? Let me know in the comments below. But D&D killer is a little bit of a misnomer because number one, D&D is still the largest game on the market. And number two, this is just fundamentally a different game. It's based on the Powered by the Apocalypse family. And as a result, it's a different gameplay experience at the table. It's going to cater to different fans. Will it cater to you? That's what we're going to be looking at right now. Basically, the call for videos has asked that we don't share the entirety of the book. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a couple select pages of things that I like, and then I'll wrap it up with who is this game for, and maybe who is this game not for. Let's go ahead and get started with something that I think is pretty innovative. The way that they recommend teaching this game, or if you want to teach it or learn it without having a group to play with, is they've released a free digital comic book that will walk you through the basics of the rules. I'm going to link that in the description of this video, but I'll also recommend checking out a video by the RPG YouTuber Bob Worldbuilder, who's done a nice walkthrough where he plays through the entirety of this comic book. I've done a playthrough on a similar system, which uses a lot of the same rules, but it's in a different genre, on Metro Otherscape. So if you want to see yours truly talk about the game and practice it, you can check out that video. However, I recommend Bob Worldbuilders. It's kind of fun too. He's newer to the system, and as a result, you get to see what it's actually like for a new player to learn it hands-on. Let's take a quick look at that comic book. So as he mentions in his review, and as I will mention, it's just got some really cool and evocative art. And this is in the comic book, comic book adjacent. But as you go through this comic, it will give you some dialogue, and it gives you a little bit of choose your own adventure, and also slowly explain some of the things like the tabs that are used in this game and how the role mechanics work, etc., what your character will look like, etc., etc. So I highly recommend playing through that comic or checking out somebody that is playing it for the purposes of learning the game. It's really cool. I had a commenter on one of my recent videos say that they prefer the old, kind of the more traditional fantasy art. So things that are more along the lines that you'd see in 80s Dungeons and Dragons, kind of like the pen and ink style. And I like that art as well, but I've also always been a sucker for comic books too. And so I think they really did a really great job. Speaking of things that I like, overall, I would say that one of the biggest benefits of this book is that they make some really strong layout choices in the way that they present information. The next page I'm going to show is the consolidated version of how to play. What I really like is that this game can be explained in a 2-page spread. And so as you look at here, it's got all of the basics to run the game, the primary role mechanic over here on the right side, making your roll, and even some of the additional like supplemental rules like camping. So long story short, taking the time to make sure that your information can be presented in a digestible way, I think that's something that is really cool. For those that aren't familiar with this game, this diverts from D20 in a way which is as follows. Dungeons and Dragons is a D20 based system, so you'll roll a 20-sided dice and you'll add some sort of a modifier based on your character's abilities. This game, instead of having numerical abilities, you're going to have things called tags. Tags are what defines your character. I'll go back over here to the sample comic book. And your tags are what tells you what your character is about. It's a word instead of a number. And so if I go back over here to this page, for instance, this character is a spirited youth who's got unstoppable fierceness, inner compass. He's a deer stalker with stealthy steps and keen senses, and so on and so forth. And so whenever you're rolling, you're going to take the number of tags or story elements that apply that would be beneficial and add them to your roll. You'll roll 2 6-sided dice, and then you will see, based on the number range, what your action does. If you roll less than 6, then you fail, and there's a consequence given. Very exciting, very dangerous. On a 7 to 9, you'll succeed, but then the game master, whoever's running the game, will also introduce a complication or a cost. And then finally, on a 10 or more, you do exactly what you set out to do. The reason that this system fundamentally differs from Dungeons and Dragons is that it is more focused on a narrative and choice-based resolution than the binary you pass or fail. The number one thing that I see people talk about when they have a hard time going from Dungeons & Dragons to a system like this, a Powered by the Apocalypse game, is that you have to have fundamentally a little bit more trust with the person that's running the game because things are a little bit more open-ended. It's not just, yes, you climb the rope or no, you don't climb the rope. It's maybe you climb the rope, but you realize that something fell out of your pocket. Or maybe you climb the rope, but it's a lot slower than intended. And as a result, you actually were not able to get the treasure that you were hoping for because another bandit got it. Because of the more open-ended nature, if a player abuses that open-endedness by coming up with stuff that's not fair, or if a game master abuses it by not ruling fairly, or you don't trust your game master, fundamentally, it's just kind of a different style of conversation at the table. If I had to put it into a nutshell, it's that. It's that because there's more open-endedness, it can lead to a different style of game conversation at the table. But enough about that little short tangent on the difference between D20 games versus Powered by the Apocalypse. Let's get back into the book. The next thing that I wanted to go over that I thought was really cool was the progression style. This game describes itself as a rustic fantasy game. And so a really great way to illustrate that is in the example of like Lord of the Rings. In Lord of the Rings, the characters start off as often are they're hobbits. They're not remarkably powerful. They're people with large hairy feet and a propensity for eating too many meals, which I relate to in a strong manner. But these characters are not necessarily coming out of the gate super strong, able, the greatest swordsman in the world. And the rules actually lend themselves to that. And some of these pre-generated characters, you have characters like a village blacksmith or the town drunkard or a traveling minstrel. And they've got this really cool way of having characters of varying power levels being able to journey together and still have it work well. This system is not, I wouldn't say it's fully rules light, but it's rules flexible in that there's a core mechanic that allows you to resolve a lot of different scenarios in a way that a powerful sword fighter can interact in a similar capacity to an untrained person. The sword fighter is going to do better, but you don't have to have so much of a balancing regiment to make it actually playable at the table. And so because of the flexible open-ended system and the way that they have their powers, it's a really cool way to have a story like The Hobbit with varying power levels. Here's the thing that I'm the geek out about. And so if you're just looking for a quick review, you can skip the session. But what is the thing that this game, I think, really adds to the Powered by the Apocalypse genre? That's what I want to take a look at here on this next page. All right, so this one-page spread, I think, is one of the most succinct ways to solve one of my biggest gripes with the Powered by the Apocalypse system. In standard Dungeon World, if you are a untrained, if you are somebody that's just first picked up a sword versus a sword master, at a basic level, people will have the same probability of achieving an action. If they are both fighting a goblin, they both are going to do it essentially equally well. And that's just because of the way that with that number range of less than 6, 7 to 9, or over 10, that's the only possible outcomes. And so sometimes as a game master, having modular or scalable difficulty, that can be tricky. This game really, really did a great job to work on that with something called might, is the way the tags work. I'll show this page here. But basically, if you have might, so for example, the might of a first-time swordsman would be at a basic level. If you were a skilled fighter, that would be heroic, and then eventually you would get up all the way to epic, the greatest sword fighter in the world. Each of those could still be represented by a tag. However, the might of that tag will determine how effective it is. And so with that might system, it makes it much easier and much more mechanically simple to say, well, yes, you can fight the goblin, but he's an experienced sword fighter, and so he's actually got might over you, which will then in turn lead to either being favored if you're the person with the advantage or imperiled. And in this case, that will add or subtract 3 power. If you're not sure about power, like I said, I recommend looking at the tutorial video or taking a look at one of my videos previously. But long story short, it's a quick shorthand mechanical way to use the fiction, the fact that somebody is relatively stronger or weaker, and actually give it a quick mechanical boost. The biggest gripe I've had with Powered by the Apocalypse is how a game master can quickly, accurately, and fairly scale difficulty, and the might system is a great way to do that. It's a little different the way that I handle it in my own game. However, I think that it's a very good way, and I will be using it in a lot of my own homebrew when it comes to, if I'm playing any kind of Powered by the Apocalypse game, I will probably steal something like this system. So really great job, the designers, on might. The last page that I wanted to show you, I will pull up right now, and that is going to be the game loop. So this is another, I think, really good way to just think about Powered by the Apocalypse games, and this consolidates what should a narrator be doing when you're presenting a scene. So anytime you're playing, the GM is going to establish the scene. So he's going to describe what the heroes, where they are and what's happening. any stakes, so what's at risk here, and the challenges and threats. So establishing, the narrator will go ahead and talk about what are they facing. Even if you're not playing this game, this loop of describing the scene, asking for the player actions, and then delivering what happens as a result, that's just a good way to play games in general. What this does is it actually takes those ideas and turns it into the language and the pattern and the rhythm that is played. So we establish the scene, then we ask what the heroes want to do, and that's where the dice will be rolled, and then giving consequences. And if you ignored a threat or you rolled something that resulted in a consequence, then that is something that will result in a consequence. Quick rules question. The one thing I have sometimes it's a little bit tricky for me to parse out as a GM is, and if you're watching this and you know in the comments, let me know. Sometimes it can be hard to balance how many threats that you put in, and if you detail multiple threats, when do you have them inflict a consequence? Is it after every hero action, or what's the mechanism, the best way to deliver threats? If you're a nerd like me, or you even know more than myself, please let me know in the comments below. So those are the pages I wanted to show you and just give you a look. Like I said, I think they represent a nice use of layout. So let's go over here to the handy dandy notebook and let's talk about who is this game for. So as we talk about who this game is for, let's start off with who it is not for. So number one, who is this not for? If you are a hardcore D20 enthusiast, then this game might not be for you. And what do I mean by that? If your loyalty is primarily to Dungeons & Dragons, if you like the simple pass or fail mechanic, and if you like games that focus on miniature-based gameplay, then this is slightly different. That's not to say that there's no tactical depth here, but the core focus of this game is just a little bit different than that. We're still telling fantastical stories, but the way the conversation plays out is a little more flexible, and it's not focusing on miniature-based combat, at least rules as written. So if you're a hardcore D20 fan, you might want to look into other games, and there's been a lot of cool games in the fantasy genre this year, so check those out. However, who might this be for? So if you like great layout, if you like comic book style art, and if you like flexible and a really cool flexible core mechanic that is something that can resolve a lot of different things and handle varying power levels, and my chicken scratch here is very nice, but hopefully you guys get the idea. If you guys like varying power levels and flexibility, then this might be something that is right up your alley. So overall, what do I think of this game? I think it's really, really cool. I really liked its predecessor, Metro Otherscape, and I really like to see the continued advancements from Son of Oak of taking one of my favorite rule systems, the Powered by the Apocalypse family, and continuing to innovate and invest in this. So is this worth your money? I actually don't know what the price of the PDF is, but if you like Powered by the Apocalypse, if you like rustic fantasy style, then I absolutely think that it is. But what do you think? Have you seen the PDF yourself? Do you have questions about the game? Is this something that looks like it's for you? Please let me know in the comments below. And as I said, check out the free comic book tutorial linked in the description of this video. Check out the video by Bob Worldbuilder where he plays through it, and check out my video on Metro Otherscape where you can see a little bit more about the system in action. Thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate all the comments and the support and the likes and the shares and all of that stuff. So thank you for helping this channel continue to grow. Have a great day, and until next time, happy gaming.